The Clearwater Bay Resort spanned 12 acres of pristine beachfront along the North Carolina coast. White sand beaches, shimmering infinity pools, a five-star restaurant, and rooms starting at $800 per night. It was exactly the kind of place my family loved to use as proof of their success. I'd owned it for 3 years. They had no idea. 6 weeks earlier, an invitation had arrived in my mailbox, my mother's elegant handwriting announcing that this year's family reunion would be held at an exclusive coastal resort. The message between the lines was obvious. Come prepared to be impressed, and definitely come prepared to feel inadequate. I arrived that Friday afternoon in my usual fashion jeans, a comfortable t-shirt, and my dependable Honda Civic rolling up behind a parade of Mercedes BMWs and Teslas. The valet gave my car a barely disguised look of disdain before handing me a ticket. "Enjoy your stay," he said with the kind of polite dismissal reserved for guests who clearly couldn't afford the parking fee. I smiled and walked inside. The lobby was breathtaking, vaulted ceilings, sweeping ocean views, and marble floors that shimmered in the afternoon light. I'd personally approved the redesign 2 years earlier, though my family would never know that. To them, I was still Emily, the family underachiever with the boring computer job. "Emily, over here," my mother called, waving from a cluster of chairs near the windows. She was surrounded by my aunts, uncles, and a flock of cousins. They'd clearly been there for a while, drinks in hand, already settling into the familiar hierarchy of family roles. "There you are," Mom said, as I approached her gaze flicking over my outfit with thinly veiled disappointment. "We've been here since noon. The check-in process was impeccable. This place really knows how to treat guests properly." "It's beautiful," I said, and meant it. "Isn't it?" Aunt Sarah chimed in. My mother's younger sister was forever competing to prove her own success. "Harold and I stayed at a resort in the Bahamas last month. That was lovely, but this might actually surpass it. The room rates alone tell you the kind of guests they attract," Mom said pointedly. $800 per night for a standard room. We're in an ocean view suite, of course. $2,000 per night, Uncle Harold added, swirling his whiskey. "Worth every penny. You can't put a price on quality." I took a seat at the edge of the group, already familiar with my role, the audience, the one expected to marvel at their expensive choices and extravagant lives. "How was your drive down?" Emily, Aunt Carol asked my mother's eldest sister, and the only one who ever made an effort to include me. "Not bad. About 5 hours from the city." "Still in that tiny apartment?" Mom asked, though she already knew the answer. "It works for me. So cramped," she said with a theatrical sigh. "I don't know how you manage. Our house in Raleigh has 6 bedrooms, and even that sometimes feels too small when we're entertaining." "Different priorities," I said evenly. My cousin Jessica, Aunt Sarah's daughter, looked up from her phone. "Are you still doing that data thing?" "Data analysis?" "Yes." "Sounds boring," she said already, glancing back at her screen. Jessica was 25, worked in marketing for her father's company, and never missed an opportunity to remind everyone about her MBA from Duke. "It pays the bills," I said. "Barely, I imagine," Aunt Sarah said with feigned sympathy. "Harold was just saying how many layoffs there have been in that sector lately." "My company is doing fine," I said. "Your company?" Mom laughed. "Emily, you work for a company. You don't own one." I could have corrected her, could have told them I'd founded Thomson Analytics 6 years ago, that we'd grown from 3 employees to 47, that our clients included some of the biggest investment firms on the East Coast. But I'd learned that lesson already. They never listened. "Right," I said instead. The afternoon unfolded in its usual pattern. My aunts compared their latest purchases, designer handbags, jewelry, new cars. My uncles discussed their golf handicaps and investment portfolios. My cousins scrolled through their phones, chiming in occasionally with stories about their glamorous jobs, expensive apartments, and busy social lives. I mostly listened, offering polite comments when required. "Dinner is at 7 in the main restaurant," Mom announced around 6. "Make sure you dress appropriately, everyone. This isn't some casual beach shack, they have standards." That last part, of course, was aimed at me. I brought something nice, I assured her. Nice by whose standards? Aunt Sarah asked with a small laugh. No offense, dear, but your idea of nice and this resort's dress code might not align. I'll manage, I said. Back in my room, an ocean view suite I'd reserved under my own name without anyone noticing, I changed into a simple black dress that cost more than most people's monthly rent. One of the few ways I allowed myself to reflect my true financial standing was through the quality of my clothes. I just rarely wore them around my family. The main restaurant was as stunning as everything else at Clearwater Bay floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the ocean-white tablecloths and candlelight glinting off crystal glasses. I'd personally hired the executive chef away from a Michelin-starred restaurant in Charleston, and the results had been worth every penny. My family had already gathered at a large table near the windows where Mom sat at the center, animatedly gesturing as she told a story to her captivated audience. Emily, she called when she spotted me. There you are. We were just discussing the wine list. Absolutely impressive selection. I took my seat at the far end of the table next to Cousin Michael, who was too absorbed in a work call to even notice I'd arrived. The sommelier recommended this Bordeaux, Uncle Harold was saying, holding up his glass. $200 a bottle, but you can taste the quality. We should order several bottles for the table, Aunt Sarah suggested. We can split the cost among all of us. Actually, Mom interjected quickly. Let's have only those who appreciate fine wine share the expense. No need to burden everyone. She glanced pointedly in my direction. The implication couldn't have been clearer. She thought I couldn't afford it. I'm fine with water, I said, which was true. I rarely drank and had no interest in proving myself with overpriced wine. See, Mom said, as if I'd just validated her assumption. Emily is perfectly content with her simple choices. Dinner arrived in courses, each one more elaborate than the last: seared scallops, lobster bisque, dry-aged ribeye, and a deconstructed key lime pie. My family exclaimed over every dish, praising the presentation and dissecting the flavors with the kind of performative sophistication that came from reading too many food blogs. This must be what it's like to eat at really elite establishments, Jessica said, snapping a photo of her ribeye for Instagram. Not the chain restaurants normal people go to. Normal people, Aunt Carol repeated with a laugh. You mean like Emily's usual spots, Mom added, her voice dripping with false kindness. I'm sure Emily enjoys her meals. Not everyone has refined palates. There's no shame in preferring simple food. I cut into my ribeye, perfectly cooked exactly as I'd instructed Chef Marcus to prepare it, and said nothing. The thing about truly luxurious experiences, Uncle Harold began settling into his favorite topic, is that you can't really appreciate them until you've reached a certain level in life. No amount of explanation can convey what it feels like to enjoy the finer things when you've earned them. Earned being the key word, Aunt Sarah added. Anyone can go into debt pretending they belong at places like this, but actually belonging, being able to enjoy it without worry, that's the real mark of success. Speaking of which, Jessica said Dad didn't. You say you were considering buying a vacation property down here? Somewhere we could use for family gatherings. I've been looking, Harold admitted, swirling his glass. But the real estate prices on this stretch of coast are astronomical. We're talking multi-million-dollar properties for anything decent. What about the resort itself? My cousin Brandon asked. Does anyone know who owns it? Might be a good investment opportunity. Some investment group probably, Harold said dismissively. These luxury resorts are usually owned by corporations or wealthy families, not the kind of thing individual investors can get into. I took a sip of water. It would be nice to have a place like this to call our own, Mom mused. Somewhere the family could gather without paying these exorbitant rates. Though I suppose that's just a fantasy. Properties like this are beyond most people's reach. Beyond some people's reach, Aunt Sarah corrected, giving a pointed look around the table. Others of us are doing quite well, thank you very much. The conversation drifted as it always did to their various financial triumphs, Uncle Harold's latest business deal, Aunt Sarah's expanding stock portfolio, Jessica's recent promotion, and Brandon's new condo in Charlotte. And then, inevitably, it turned to me. So Emily, Uncle Harold said with the kind of forced joviality people use when they're about to make someone uncomfortable still living in that studio apartment, 1 bedroom actually. I corrected mildly. 1 bedroom, of course. And still driving that old Honda. It's reliable. Reliable, he repeated with a chuckle. That's one way to look at it. I suppose when you're on a budget, reliability matters more than comfort or style. Harold, Aunt Carol said softly. Maybe I'm just being realistic, he interrupted. Emily is what, 30 now? Harold asked. 29, I said. 29, right? At 29, most people in this family have established themselves good jobs, nice homes, the beginnings of real wealth. But Emily here is still in an entry-level position, still renting, still driving a car that's probably older than some of the staff here. It's just a different path, Aunt Carol tried again. It's a lower path, Aunt Sarah said bluntly. And there's nothing wrong with that. Not everyone can be successful. Someone has to be average. Mom nodded slowly. I've accepted that Emily isn't going to reach the heights we hoped for. She's content with less, and that's fine. Different people have different capacities. The table went quiet. Some stared at me with pity. Others avoided my eyes entirely. The important thing, Mom continued, is that we don't make Emily feel bad about her limitations. She's doing the best she can with what she has. I set down my fork carefully. That's very understanding of you, I said quietly. We're family, Mom said warmly. We support each other regardless of success level. Even if you can't contribute financially to gatherings like this, your presence still means something. Though, speaking of contribution, Aunt Sarah added, we should probably discuss how we're splitting the costs for the weekend, the rooms, the meals, the activities we've planned. Obviously, we'll divide it among those who can afford it, Mom said quickly. Emily, don't worry about it. We'll cover your share. That's not necessary, I began. Please, Uncle Harold interrupted. We know you're struggling. Let us help. That's what family does. I'm not struggling, I said calmly. Emily, honey, Mom said, her tone dripping with gentle condescension. We've seen your apartment. We know what you drive. We understand your salary can't be very impressive. There's no shame in accepting help. I don't need help, I said. Pride. Aunt Sarah sighed. That's the problem with young people today, too proud to accept reality. I could feel the familiar frustration rising, the same conversation we'd had in different forms for years. No matter what I said, they'd already decided who I was. You don't belong at this level, Mom said finally, her voice sharpening. And I don't mean that cruelly, Emily, she added, adopting her favorite tone of condescending reason. I mean it realistically. This resort, this lifestyle, these experiences, they're for people who've earned them. You haven't. Not yet. Maybe someday, if you work hard and make better choices, you'll get there. But right now, you're out of your depth. She should stick to motels, Aunt Sarah agreed. Nothing wrong with motels. They're perfectly adequate for people in Emily's situation. The entire restaurant seemed to fall silent, though maybe that was just my imagination. Still, I could feel eyes turning toward our table, curious glances flicking our way. You know what I said, pushing my chair back. Maybe you're right. Maybe I should, Miss Thompson. I turned to see Richard Chin, the resort's director, standing beside our table. Impeccably dressed and perfectly composed, Richard had managed luxury properties around the world. He was 58, and the very first person I'd hired when I bought Clearwater Bay 3 years ago. Yes, I said calmly. I apologize for interrupting your dinner, Richard said smoothly, but there's a matter that requires your attention. The contractors have completed renovations on the spa building, and they'll need your approval before proceeding with the landscaping. The table went dead silent. Contractors, Mom repeated faintly. Richard didn't even glance at her. His focus remained entirely on me. Also, he continued, the architect sent over the final plans for the new beachfront villas. I have them in my office whenever you're ready to review them. And the quarterly financial reports arrived today. Revenue is up 18% from last quarter. The restaurant is operating at capacity most nights, and we're fully booked for the next 6 months. That's excellent news, I said. Thank you, Richard. Of course, he said, with a slight bow. Oh, and your usual suite has been prepared for the rest of your stay. I know you booked the Ocean View room for this weekend, but your private residence is always available if you prefer. Ocean View is fine, I said. Very good. Will you be attending the staff meeting tomorrow morning? The management team would appreciate your input on the expansion plans. Of course, I replied. Richard nodded once, then turned and walked away with quiet authority, leaving behind a silence even heavier than before. You know what I said, pushing my chair back. Maybe you're right. Maybe I should miss Thompson. I turned to find Richard Chin, the resort's director, standing beside our table. Yes, I said. I apologize for interrupting your dinner, Richard said smoothly, but there's a matter that requires your attention. The contractors have completed the renovations on the spa building and they need your approval before proceeding with the landscaping. The table fell utterly silent. Contractors? Mom said faintly. Richard didn't even glance at her. His focus remained entirely on me. Also, he continued, the architect sent over the final plans for the new beachfront villas. I have them in my office whenever you're ready to review them. And the quarterly financial reports came in today. Revenue is up 18% from last quarter. The restaurant is operating at capacity most nights, and we're fully booked through the next 6 months. That's excellent news, I said evenly. Thank you, Richard. Of course, he replied with a small nod. Oh, and your usual suite has been prepared for the rest of your stay. I know you booked the Ocean View room for this weekend, but your private residence is always available if you prefer. Ocean View is fine, I said. Very good. Will you be attending the staff meeting tomorrow morning? The management team would appreciate your input on the expansion plans. I'll be there, I said. Richard nodded once, then turned to go, but paused. Forgive me, he said politely. Are these guests bothering you? I can have them moved to a different table if you'd prefer. That won't be necessary, I said. They're family. Ah, Richard replied, his expression the picture of professional neutrality. Of course. Enjoy your dinner. He walked away, leaving behind an almost tangible silence. Mom's face had gone pale. Aunt Sarah's mouth hung open. Uncle Harold looked as if he'd been struck. Emily, Mom finally whispered. What was that about? That was Richard Chin, I said, calmly settling back into my chair. He's the resort director. He reports to me. Reports to you, Aunt Sarah echoed weakly. I own Clearwater Bay Resort, I said simply. I bought it 3 years ago. The renovations Richard mentioned are part of the expansion I've been planning. We're adding 6 new beachfront villas, upgrading the spa, and expanding the restaurant to include a private dining room for events. The silence stretched long and heavy. You own this place, Uncle Harold finally managed. Yes. The entire resort, Jessica asked, her phone slipping forgotten from her hand. The resort, the beach, the restaurant, everything. All 12 acres, I said evenly. I purchased it for $47 million in 2021. It's now valued at around $68 million, thanks to the improvements and the reputation we've built. $47 million, Mom repeated faintly, as if the number itself had winded her. The financing was straightforward, I continued. My company, Thomson Analytics, had been doing very well. We provide financial modeling and data analysis for investment firms. I founded it 6 years ago with 2 employees. We now have 47 staff members and offices in New York, Charlotte, and Atlanta. Our annual revenue last year was $32 million. Aunt Carol was staring at me, eyes wide. Emily, why didn't you tell us I tried? I said quietly. More than once. But you'd already decided I was a failure, so nothing I said mattered. When I invited you to my company's launch party, you said it sounded boring. When I mentioned buying property, you assumed I meant a condo and joked about my starter home. Whenever I tried to talk about my work, you changed the subject. But the apartment, Mom said weakly. The car. I like my apartment. It's a 15-minute walk from my office and I don't need much space since I travel frequently between our locations. As for the car, it's reliable and efficient. I've never felt the need to impress anyone with what I drive. The room rates, Aunt Sarah whispered. You said they were $800 a night. For standard guests? Yes, I said. Obviously, I don't charge myself to stay at my own resort. But you wouldn't know that because you assumed I was staying in a standard room and struggling to afford it. Uncle Harold had recovered enough to look indignant. If you own this place, why let us go on thinking you were paying full price? Because I wanted to see, I said simply. I wanted to see if you'd treat me differently based on what you thought I could afford, I said. And you did. You spent the entire evening mocking my supposed poverty, offering to help me with costs I don't need help with, and telling me I don't belong at this level. We didn't know, Mom protested. Exactly, I said. You didn't know and you didn't care to know. You assumed, you judged, and you treated me accordingly. But Emily, Aunt Carol said softly, why not just tell us the truth? Would you have believed me? I asked. If I'd sat down at this table tonight and said, by the way, I own this resort, would you have believed me? Or would you have thought I was delusional? Or lying? The silence that followed was my answer. I built something real, I continued. I created a successful company from nothing, invested wisely, and bought a property I'm passionate about improving. I did it all without your help, without your approval, and without your knowledge. And the whole time you assumed I was failing. We thought we were being supportive, Mom said weakly. Supportive? I repeated. You told me I don't belong at this level. You said I should stick to motels. You've spent years making me feel small, just so you could feel big. The restaurant had gone completely silent now. Other diners were openly watching. A few even had their phones out. What happens now? Uncle Harold asked quietly. Now I said you finish your dinner. The meal is complimentary, of course. I comp all family meals. I have for the past 3 years, actually. Every time you've visited Clearwater Bay, every meal you've charged to your room, every spa treatment and beach service, I've been covering it. You've been paying for us, Aunt Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Every visit, I confirmed. Because despite everything, you're still family, and I wanted you to enjoy yourselves, even if you didn't think I belonged here. Mom's eyes filled with tears. Emily, I'm so sorry. We had no idea. No, I said gently. You're sorry you were wrong. That's not the same as being sorry for how you treated me. You spent years making me feel inadequate, and you enjoyed it. The only thing that's changed is that now you know I'm successful, so you have to rewrite your story. That's not fair, Jessica protested. Isn't it? I asked. 5 minutes ago, you were all agreeing that I'm average, that I have limitations, that I can't appreciate fine dining or luxury experiences. But now that you know I own this place, suddenly you want to apologize. No one spoke. I stood, setting my napkin neatly on the table. Enjoy the rest of your dinner. Enjoy the resort. Your rooms are paid for as always. I paused. But I think I'll take my meals separately for the rest of the weekend. Emily, please, Mom said, reaching for my hand. Don't go like this. Let's talk about this. We've been talking, I said quietly. For years. You just haven't been listening. I walked away from the table, aware of every eye in the restaurant following me. Richard met me near the entrance, his calm professionalism unshaken. Everything all right, Miss Thompson? He asked softly. Fine, I said. Just a family matter. I apologize if my interruption caused any complications. You did exactly right, I assured him. They were planning to help me pay for dinner since they assumed I couldn't afford it. Richard's expression didn't change, but I caught the faintest flicker in his eyes. I see, he said. Shall I arrange separate dining accommodations for the remainder of their stay? That won't be necessary, I replied. I'll take my meals in my suite. They can have the restaurant. Of course. I'll have Chef Marcus prepare something special and send it up. Thank you, Richard. I turned toward the elevators, my phone already buzzing with incoming messages. Aunt Sarah, Mom, all of them suddenly eager to explain, to apologize, to justify. I powered the phone off. Back in my suite, the owner's residence, which spanned the entire top floor of the main building, I stood before the wide glass windows overlooking the ocean. The sun was setting, painting the horizon in soft strokes of gold and rose. I'd bought this place for that view, for the peace of the water, for the steady rhythm of the waves, for the reminder that some things were larger and quieter than family drama or social hierarchies. My phone buzzed again. I'd forgotten to turn it off completely. One final message had come through from Aunt Carol. I'm proud of you, Emily. Always have been. I'm sorry I didn't say it more. That one I answered. Thank you. That means something. A soft knock came at the door. When I opened it, a room service attendant stood beside a cart set with covered dishes and a bottle of wine. Compliments of Chef Marcus, he said with a smile. He asked me to tell you congratulations on a successful quarterly report. I smiled back. Please, tell him thank you. When I was alone again, I lifted the lids from the dishes. Marcus had prepared my favorite, a simple pasta with fresh tomatoes and basil, a side of roasted vegetables, and a slice of his signature chocolate torte. No performance, no pretense, just good food made by someone who knew what I actually liked. I carried my plate out onto the balcony and ate while the stars appeared one by one above the darkening sea, the surf whispering below. Tomorrow I'd meet with the management team about the expansion plans. Next week I'd fly to Charlotte for a client presentation. Next month we'd break ground on the new villas. My family would adjust or they wouldn't. Either way, I'd keep building. The resort phone rang. I answered to find Richard on the line. I apologize for the late call, Ms. Thompson, he said. Your mother is in the lobby requesting to speak with you. Tell her I'm not available tonight, I said evenly. But she can leave a message and I'll consider meeting with her tomorrow. Of course. Also, Richard continued, I wanted to mention that several of your family members have been asking the staff questions about you, whether you really own the property, what your role is, how long you've been the owner. And what are you telling them? I asked. The truth, Richard said, simply. That you purchased Clearwater Bay 3 years ago, that you've personally overseen every aspect of its renovation and growth, and that you're one of the most hands-on owners I've worked with in 30 years of hospitality management. Thank you, Richard. It's simply the truth, he replied. Good night, Ms. Thompson. Good night. I hung up and returned to the balcony, my chocolate torte still half finished. They'd know everything by morning. The questions they'd asked the staff would spread quickly, and by breakfast everyone in the resort would know that the family who had dismissed me so casually at dinner had no idea who I really was. Part of me felt vindicated, but mostly I just felt tired. I'd spent years building something meaningful, creating jobs, providing experiences, investing in a place I believed in. And the whole time, the people who were supposed to know me best had chosen not to see me at all. Maybe that said more about them than it ever did about me. My phone buzzed again. I'd forgotten to fully power it off. Another message. This time from Uncle Harold. We need to talk about investment opportunities. I'd like to discuss partnering on your next property acquisition. I deleted it without responding. They still didn't get it. They thought that now, knowing about my success, they could capitalize on it, benefit from it, share in it. But they'd had years to be part of my life, and they'd chosen judgment instead. The ocean stretched out before me, vast and endless, silvered under the rising moon. Somewhere beyond that horizon lay other projects, other challenges, other dreams waiting to be built. And if I had to build them alone, well, I'd been doing that all along.